As we meet here today to mark almost 50 years of bail reform, we have much to celebrate. Yet we also must take this opportunity to confront the challenges to safe, effective, and fair pretrial justice as we figure out collaboratively how to make those elements a reality. Across this country, there are more people in jail this afternoon awaiting court action than for any other reason. Thousands upon thousands of these individuals now detained will actually be released once they're convicted. Thousands more will ultimately have their charges dismissed when reviewed by a prosecutor. All too often, our current system permits the unfettered release of dangerous defendants, while those who pose minimal, manageable risk are held in costly jail space. All too often, we see pretrial release decision-making built upon a one-dimensional model which neither supports the legislative presumption in favor of release, nor takes into account individual strengths and risks of each defendant.
Historically, bail bondsmen have been the middleman in getting people out of jail. They, in effect, sell freedom. Criminal suspects buy their release by paying a bail agent a fee to post a bond that is supposed to guarantee they will show up in court. But a CNN special assignment investigation discloses serious flaws in the bail bond system, a system driven by money. For example, this New Orleans bounty hunter is accused of beating a bail jumper and then locking him in a car trunk. The bail jumper had been charged with shoplifting a bottle of aspirin. Because courts release defendants to the custody of the bail bondsman, there is no need for arrest warrants. Not only does fugitive pickup go unregulated, there is virtually no regulation of the bail bond industry. The job requires no law enforcement training, and there are little or no background checks of bail agents. Yet in many states, bondsmen have almost as much say as judges and prosecutors in deciding who gets out of jail. 134 U.S. jails are presently under order to reduce overcrowded conditions. More than half the people in these jails are what is known as pretrial detainees. They are still waiting for their days in court, taking up jail space, oftentimes because they cannot afford bail. 15 years ago, Kentucky outlawed bail bondsmen altogether. In 1976, then-Governor Julian Carroll spearheaded the drive to banish bail bondsmen from Kentucky, replacing them with a statewide pretrial release program. The Kentucky program is paying dividends. The number of inmates awaiting trial in its jails is 25% below the national average.
When I came to the General Assembly in 1961, I really had on my heart at the time that something needed to be done about release of prisoners who were in jail and not becoming so obligated to a bail bondsman that they spent pretty much all of their income. And not only that, there was no control over what they charged. They could charge whatever the traffic would bear. In many instances, they were taking automobiles. If not taking automobiles, they were taking a TV set or something else of value. And if you had nothing in value, at least a subtle suggestion was made, well, go steal something of value. And so a lot of our pawn shops were taking things for people to get out of bonding that had been stolen. And so we knew that one of the things we could accomplish by abolishing bail bondsmen was to reduce our crime rate on stealing. And so I finally got a bill passed to require bail bondsmen to at least register their fees with the Department of Insurance. and no approvals involved, but they were at least had to make their fees known, which was the first time they had anybody that made them accountable. In '75, I started doing some planning about doing something else in terms of abolishing bail bondsmen as a means by which individuals got out of jail. And so we introduced the bill that was passed in '76. And when it was first introduced, I had a lot of opposition surface, particularly among the bail bondsmen, and certainly the Johnson Bonding Company, but from several prosecutors who had good relationships with the bondsmen. One of the things that we had found through the years, a bail bondsman had not only elected judges, because they needed the judges for forfeiture of bonds, and they wanted to make certain that their judge was a friend and wouldn't forfeit their bond and would continue it while they were out looking for this individual that had absconded somewhere, and so their bond, of course, was called. And of course, the bail bondsman at the time had the right then to go arrest that individual wherever they were and physically bring them in order to keep their bond from being forfeited. And that was obviously something that was causing a great deal of problems within our society, as the ability of the bail bondsman to go arrest somebody and bring them in to keep from forfeiting their own bonds. But among another group that we had opposition from were the jailers, because the jailers were being paid at that time for the number of individuals in jail, rather than them not being paid for someone out of jail. Now that, we also had a program at that time, I'm not sure what you might have called it, but somewhat of a finder's fee, where when someone showed up at the jail, the jailer would call and let the bail bondsman know they were there, and the jailer would pick up another $20 and maybe as much as $40 or $60 within a tour for the number of people they were able to call to the bail bondsman. The FBI visited me one day with my Secretary of Justice at the time and advised me that a contract had been put out on me because of our passage of the bill. And so my security was substantially increased. Bulletproof windows at that time were put in the governor's office. We had bulletproof windows put in the mansion, and I had two children, one at Murray State University and one at Western State University, that we were concerned about. And so police protection were provided them 24 hours a day, even in the classrooms, for a long period of time until we got through that period of time and the bill was finally declared constitutional.
My father had been a state representative for years from Western Kentucky and also a criminal defense attorney. And he took a position, he left the House of Representatives in the fall of '75, and we moved to Frankfort, to the capital city, and he joined Governor Carroll's staff as his chief executive officer. And he decided to make it one of his missions to get rid of bail bondsmen in Kentucky and include that as part of the legislation in the judicial article. And this very much offended the bail bondsmen. And I do remember Daddy saying that they were a bunch of thugs and we had to get rid of them. And I really didn't appreciate that at 13. Sometime shortly after the legislative session began, he came home and sat us down and told us that we needed to watch where we went and watch what we did because he was receiving some death threats. Shortly after that, within a matter of days, we had a state trooper living in our home 24/7. And at 13, I thought that was somewhat odd. The trooper would take us to Pizza Hut, take me to Pizza Hut. I'd sit at the booth at Pizza Hut, and he would sit behind me. And it wasn't until I grew older before I realized that these people must be the nearest thing to the mafia that we could have had. They're dangerous, and I will always fight hard to keep pretrial services because we have something very special in this state.
Prior to the unified court system in Kentucky, local governments ran the court systems in their respective counties. There was magistrates, also police court judges, which was really judges who sat in little city courts. Judges and magistrates were not required to even have a law degree. Back home in Harlan County, I recall that one of the magistrates ran a gas station. Often I went to the gas station and talked to the gas station owner, who would decide if he wanted to release someone from jail or hold them. The court system was very biased back then. It was more so police-oriented. And I even had one trial commissioner later in years tell me that police officers would make a notation, like in the upper right-hand side of a citation, maybe just a letter or a word, and that would clue the magistrate on whether that police officer wanted that defendant released from jail, fined, or just held. Nowadays, judges couldn't get by with that.
The unified court system in Kentucky is like the system in a handful of states around the country. It provides for a unified court in that all levels of trial court and appellate courts are all part of a single agency. We have no local courts in Kentucky. They are all related to one single system at different levels, with the Chief Justice serving as the executive head of the unified court.
Pretrial officers were hired back in 1976, I think it was, started out, 78. There was one pretrial officer in rural districts. I can't speak for anywhere else. But there was one pretrial officer for each county, and that officer worked 7 days a week.
That first night that pretrial services came into operation, June of 1976, was a hot night, I remember, very chaotic. We had been in training for a week, and we had come from many different paths. Some of us out of college, some came from a law enforcement background. But to go through training in a nice, sterile environment to a jail facility, we were just trying to really go by the seat of our pants. You know, actually the bail bondsmen were still, they had gotten an injunction to operate in Jefferson County, so we were actually operating with them side by side. Thank God we were young and naive and didn't realize that they did not like us and didn't want us there. We thought everybody wanted us and liked us, but it was you know, there were some hurdles that we had to cross because of those guys, because they were actually able to secure bonds because they were able to navigate the system better than us. When our shift was over with at 8 o'clock in the morning, we were drained. We didn't know what we had done. But we do know there were people walking out of that jail that did not have to post money to get out.
The Federal Sentencing Bail Reform Act of 1984 replaced the Act of 1966. The main difference between the two acts was that now the court could consider pretrial detention for cases involving dangerousness. In the past, the court could only consider pretrial detention for cases involving risk of flight. The Bail Reform Act of 1984 was a way for Congress to provide greater accuracy in assessing release or detention issues. And secondly, it provided objective criteria for judges to consider in those decisions. There have been two issues with the newer act, however. The first is the lack of uniformity of application of the new act across the country. And secondly, trying to define what dangerousness means. Those two issues will have to be further legislated in Congress.
You know, over the years, we've done a lot to try to develop a useful tool for judges to use in setting bail bonds. Pretrial Services has developed an instrument that has become a validated instrument. We're real proud of that, where we use an evidence-based model to assist the judge in setting bail bond low, moderate, high risk for reoffending or returning to court. It assists the judge in that way, and we're really fortunate in another way in that in Kentucky, within this past year, there's been a great emphasis placed on evidence-based decision-making in our criminal system. We're all about some reforms in sentencing, and this fits hand in glove with the impetus that's been going on here in the state.
All too often we see pretrial release decision-making built upon a one-dimensional model which neither supports the legislative presumption in favor of release, nor takes into account individual strengths and risks of each defendant.
With the revisions to the statutes in regard to veterans, so far I have been able to help 2 that required rehab and 1 financial. The first one I had was a middle-aged man. He'd been arrested 9 times in 3 months, and it was due to alcohol-related offenses. So when he was placed on my MCR program by the judge, we talked, and he did admit to me that he had an addiction problem. So we proceeded there to go ahead and find a placement for him through the Veterans Administration for a rehab center. The second veteran that I was able to assist was due to financial problems. He was in the middle of foreclosure on his home. I gave him the information for the Military One Source, and he made the proper calls in order to get the GI Bill going for him. He said that he had totally forgotten about getting assistance through them for his mortgage.
I feel Monitoring Conditional Release Program is a very effective mechanism to hold defendants accountable due to the fact that we provide judges with accurate information when it comes to their criminal background, their personal ties, their mental health status, their drug addictions. We provide all this information to the judges, and the judges are confident in the decisions they make on borderline defendants, people who may get out or may not get out. They're just kind of on the fence, so to speak. Particularly felony charges. In Johnson, Martin, Lawrence County in year 2010, we supervised 117 cases. 72% of those people were successfully completed the program, and I'm really proud with the program we've got, and I feel that the judges have the utmost confidence in the world in this program that we have, and it definitely ensures community safety with some of the tools that we have to monitor people with home incarceration, with curfew checks, with office visits, with drug testing, and that's just a few things that we have to offer that pretrial can use, resources that are out there in the community that we use to effectively monitor these people. So yes, I feel this is an excellent program. The judges are extremely tickled with this program and the way it's going.
The importance of evidence-based practices in the criminal justice system in Kentucky, I think, can be summed up as follows. We are trying to implement things that we have found to be scientifically tested and true when we release someone on bail. The ultimate goal is to have someone to return to court, because there is a presumption they're innocent of these crimes, but in attempting to make sure they return to court, we also are trying to ensure the victims of criminal acts in Kentucky that they're also being protected. So ultimately it's the utilization of scientifically proven tests that have been conducted in the past that establish the likelihood that a particular individual will return to court.
I'm very optimistic about the future of this profession of pretrial services. I really feel strongly about justice, pretrial justice, and fairness in the criminal justice system. I think the way we accomplish success first starts with the way we measure it. A lot of people in this field measure success as release rates, appearance rates, public safety rates, But we don't like to talk about those that do fail. You know, it's easy for us to say that 90% of the people that we release do not commit new crimes while on pretrial release. What about the 10 that did? We don't like to talk about that. We have to be more open and transparent, and we have to be accountable and responsible. We're in the business of risk management. It's not 100%. Bad things will happen, and we just have to deal with it. Our job is to maintain public safety by managing risk. We cannot prevent crime. It's going to happen. Most of the people that are in our jails are not violent people. They're poor people who made bad decisions. There are violent people in jail, and they probably need to stay there. But most people who are arrested can be safely released into the community. And it's our job to identify those people objectively using the tools that we have so that we can better inform the court so that they can make the right decision.
In a perfect world, I would see pretrial justice being fair. You know, 50 years ago, the Manhattan Bail Project revolutionized thinking about how fairness and efficiency can come together to create justice. While advances were made, the pretrial program spread around the country. The use of bail and especially the use of commercial sureties is ensconced still in many jurisdictions. I think a culture of fairness is needed. We have to educate the court system and the people, the populace, about what pretrial does. And I think that comes down to a political and a fiscal strategy coming together. We live in a world of technology and data collection, and we have to ask ourselves questions, okay? What's the cost of a person sitting in a jail cell waiting for disposition for his case? We can validate that he is a good prospect for release without money bond or release with non-monetary supervision. Why don't we do that? What's the cost of a court system and a community for putting a system of money bail that ignores available data and research that collects verified information on arrested persons? Can we afford to give up that data just so that we can make some money on a person being in jail or getting out of jail? What's the cost of not being able to share data appropriately within the criminal justice system? There's a cost to giving up data, and the cost is a fractured criminal justice system, repudiation, a reduplication of work and effort, inferior and incomplete information to the court system in making release decisions, and the collateral consequences that can happen when defendants spend days behind bars unnecessarily while their case is being processed.
Well, I've been with pretrial for a year now, and I'm looking forward to pretrial expanding the range of services that we can offer to expand our supervision program and expand the opportunities that we can give to help promote public safety.
It's been an amazing journey, and I have met some remarkable people along the way. I've worked with some amazing people with AOC, with Kentucky Pretrial Services, and with NAPSA, and I've learned a great deal from all those people over the years. And one piece of advice that I can offer from my tenure with the agency is to please not become a chameleon. And everyone knows what a chameleon is. It's that little lizard that changes colors to adapt to its surroundings. We all have had the opportunity to work with judges that may not be pro-release. They may not believe in releasing people at the pretrial stage. They may want to use bail as a punitive measure. We may have worked in communities where the mindset of the community is to lock them up and throw away the key. It doesn't matter if the person is guilty or innocent, or if they've had their day in court. Just the mere fact that they've been charged, they're presumed guilty, and they should stay in jail. Never buy into that. Don't blend into your surroundings just because it's easy. Don't blend in to fit in. Never be afraid to fight for those fundamental rights of the people that you come into contact with every day. Pretrial services is one of the most noblest professions, one of the best jobs that you can have, and I'm proud to say that I work for pretrial services.
Kentucky's system of pretrial justice is amazing to me. Not only does Kentucky protect the constitutional right of every individual that enters the Kentucky court system to be innocent until proven guilty, to not be unjustly incarcerated. But we also protect the public. We provide for safe alternatives to incarceration. And I think we provide a system that provides for speedy justice, and we're responsive to the needs of the public as well as the defendant.
Kentucky's success is bad news for the bail bond industry. If other states follow its lead, bail agents will be going the way of the dinosaur. And because of jail overcrowding, many places are searching for new ways to safely free inmates.
Here we are 50 years later asking the same question those pioneers asked 50 years ago. Is this the best we can do?